Chapter 6. Here There Be Monsters. The First Hell. "Well, here we go then," Crinnan said. He grunted as he stood up, noting that his wounds had closed. The throbbing red in his peripherals had vanished, and getting back to his feet was near effortless. "I guess I just go kill someone then." As Crinnan walked, he thought more of his mother to pass the time. He recalled a memory of when he was young, 3 or 4, he imagined. His eldest brother, Kirsten, had pushed him down a flight of stairs, and as he stumbled, he knocked down his twin brother, Ruban. His mother was quick to tend to him and slapped Kirsten on the back of the head as she ran past him.
"It's okay, loves."
He heard her voice soothe as she held him in one arm and Ruban in the other.
"You will be okay."
Crinnan could feel the warmth of her embrace as he trudged through the hells and wished she could descend the proverbial stairs and scoop him up once again. He sighed as he thought about it all and thought that if Sage and Lucas truly could help him escape, then the first thing he should do would be to call his mother. A slight tremor at his feet pulled him out of his thoughts. What was that? He stepped back and spun his sword in hand. What's going on? The ground shook more violently, and he watched as small mounds of crumbling and burning dirt began to form all around him. He widened his stance and raised his weapon in defense. Whatever was coming, there seemed to be a lot of them. A black, pointed claw pierced one of the mounds and planted itself into the ground. Crinnan watched as more claws emerged and realized that they were legs. The bodies of small, shining, ebony monsters that resembled vicious-looking spiders pushed themselves out of the holes. They had clusters of red, blinking eyes at what Crinnan perceived was the front of them, and 2 shining white fangs that dripped with some kind of gummy, viscous fluid. The legs tore through the ground as a spider skittered Crinnan's way. He stepped back, for the monster had a surprising amount of speed, and prepared to defend himself. The beast leaped from the ground and released a high-pitched squeal. When it was within reach, Crinnan swung his blade and bisected the spider. It crashed to the ground and vanished in a plume of thick smoke, just as nearly half a dozen other spiders poked through the dirt. "Hell spider killed, plus 100 rank. New rank, 2,105,666,285. "Hey, that's lower than it was before!" Crinnan snapped as he heard the information read out to him. "What the fuck?" Crinnan remembered his rank had been 2 billion last time he checked, not 2,100,000,000. Oh shit. Crinnan backpedaled as his eyes bounced from spider to spider. One ran up as if it were attacking his heel, and he jammed the point of his blade through it and into the ground. When he pulled his weapon up, the remainder charged him. "Hell spider killed, plus 100 rank. New rank, 2,105,666,185. "Yeah, I know," Crinnan snapped in response to the notification. The first spider leaped through the air and found itself promptly sliced in half. The other 4 were too fast, though, and planted their pointed legs into Crinnan's skin before he could react. He howled and staggered backward as he reached up and grabbed one before it could sink its fangs into him. He threw it to the ground and stomped on it as the others rapidly planted their teeth in and out of him. "Hell spider times 2 killed, plus 200 rank. New rank, 2,105,665,985. "Shut up!" Crinnan yelled. The spider's teeth were poking holes into his body. Blood was dripping from him, and his peripherals were beginning to show the throbbing red again. With a growl, he dropped his sword and grabbed hold of 2 of the 3 that remained. He ripped them from his body and flung them as far away as he could, and snatched up the last. It flailed wildly in his hands as it tried to stab him with its appendages, and he growled and smashed his palms toward each other, squishing the spider into nothing more than a black, oily soup that dripped from his fingers. As it turned into smoke and faded into the air above him, the final 2 charged toward him. "Hell spider killed, plus 100 rank. New rank,
2,105,665,885.
Crinnan didn't have time to retrieve his sword before the next spider leaped toward him. He caught it midair just as the second latched onto him. With the first spider in his right hand, he reached up with his left and pulled the second off his body. As they both thrashed about, he finally grit his teeth and slammed them together, smashing their bodies against each other. They popped like grapes, and their greasy black blood splashed up in his face. As they turned to smoke and vanish, Crinnan lowered his head and groaned in utter disgust.
Hell Spider ×2, killed, plus 200 rank. New rank, 2,105,665,685.
If I say thanks, do I get super special politeness points too? Crinnan snapped angrily at the voice that kept reading to him. He huffed in place for a moment and tried to wipe the greasy spider blood off his body. That was weird and gross. He flung his hands about, trying to get the ichor off of him. In his life, he'd had his share of blood and monster gore splashed on him. He should have been used to it, but Crinnan always felt sick when he was covered in something's innards. After spending a few moments rubbing his hands in the dirt to get the oil off, he finally decided to sit down and take a small break. He was curious why his rank had changed. Why had it dropped 100 million points? Had he done something wrong? The thought dominated his mind for a moment, and then he realized something. He wasn't the only person in the Hells. If the ranking system was to be believed, there were over 2 billion other people involved. Crinnan thought about it a moment, and based on his social studies classes in the academy, he recalled the population of mainland Govia being around 3 billion as of about a decade ago. That fell in line with the ranking system and with what he had been told by Lucas about all mainland Govians being required to participate in the Hells to purge sin from their minds. With that in mind, Crinnan realized that the ranking system was more of a tug-of-war than anything else. Every participant was always gaining and losing rank. That thought led him to realize that crossing the 90th percentile and even into the 80th might be harder than he thought. Of course, he sighed as he stared down at his naked self. Just like in real life, everyone's trying to be better than each other, at the expense of those left behind. Stupid. He reluctantly stood back up and lifted his sword off the ground. Begrudgingly, he started walking again. Walking is stupid. Crinnan grumbled to himself as he kicked a mound of dust with his bare foot. A hand reached out of the dust and grabbed Crinnan's ankle in response. Crinnan looked down, sighed, and then stabbed the sand with his sword. The hand released its grip, flailed wildly around for a moment, and then withdrew into the ground beneath it. Stupid bodiless hands everywhere, Crinnan said under his breath. The Hells was beginning to grate on his nerves. He was tired of walking, tired of being naked. He wanted to just leave. Sage claimed that he was trying to get him out, and Crinnan wasn't sure he even trusted him. It wasn't like he had anything to lose, though. The sound of thumping nearby pulled Crinnan out of his whining and general self-pity, and he looked up. He didn't see anything in the immediate area, and so he started walking toward where he thought the thumping noise was coming from. After crossing a hill, he came to a stop. Maybe 50 yards from the base of the hill, he saw a large bipedal black hairy beast stomping about with a club in his hand that was as thick as a tree trunk. The creature didn't have a neck, and its head looked more like a misshapen tumor growing out the top of its torso. Crinnan looked down at his naked body, over at his sword, and finally to the monster. It did not look like it would be a particularly easy creature to slay, but he felt he could manage. Back in the real world, he'd killed plenty of monsters with his friends. This one looked slow and stupid, which suited Crinnan's skill set well. He spun his sword and then jogged down the hill toward the beast. The monster quickly noticed Crinnan. It clenched its fist and arched its back so that its neckless head was facing the black sky, and it belted out a mighty roar. The intensity of the beast's voice gave Crinnan pause, and for a moment his jog halted. He watched as the hairy monster pounded its chest with its free hand, and locked its glowing red eyes onto Crinnan.
"Well, here we go, I guess,"
Crinnan mumbled as the beast took a step toward him. Crinnan ran, and so did the monster. As they neared one another, the beast lifted its club to strike. Crinnan, in turn, readied his sword, and when they were only a few more steps from each other, he jerked to the right in anticipation of the creature's strike. The monster reacted quicker than Crinnan anticipated. The beast swung his weapon, missing Crinnan as had been expected. Instead of pulling his club back for another strike, however, the monster pivoted on his heel. It spun and used the momentum from the original attack to keep the weapon moving. The club ultimately slammed against Crinnan's naked body with a speed and force that he did not anticipate. The power of the weapon lifted him off the ground and sent him flying through the air. He slammed into the ground and kicked up a trail of dust as he skidded to a stop. With a groan, Crinnan attempted to push himself up, but failed, as it seemed the bones in his legs had been shattered. The beast roared and charged. As it approached, it didn't hesitate. It slammed its club down on Crinnan's body. He felt every bit of himself collapse beneath the weight of the weapon, and as he heard the sound of his skull popping, everything went black.
"You have died."